So the news. Seems like each morning we get up and there's more news. There's truly more news. You know, I think we could all agree that we're living in a time of a great awakening. We talk about that often, right? We're living in this time undeniably of a great awakening. And it's not just awakening spiritually, it's also awakening like mentally. It's like we're becoming more and more aware right now, you know, of things that have been going on our planet around finance, around politics, globally, and even we're becoming more and more aware of the dynamics here in our own homeland. And the question becomes each day, how do I navigate this? How do we navigate this, right? How do we navigate this? You know, when I was in high school, I was a basketball player. You know, I actually started as a young kid, about in 5th grade. There was a group of us, and we grew up together, and we went through 5th grade all the way into high school. And so we'd played together a lot, quite a lot, and we were good. We were a really good team, but every now and then we would lose, you know. It wasn't frequent, but we would every now and then. And the coach would say, okay, we'd come to practice that next Monday, and he says, you know what, guys? It's time to get back to the basics. We got to get back to the fundamentals. We got to get back to the fundamentals. So this morning's talk is very much that. It's like, what do we do in these times? We got to get back to the basics. We got to get back to the fundamentals. So the title of the talk this morning is Breath, Light, and Remembrance. How Early Christianity Taught Humanity to Awaken Together. There's a very definite pattern that we're going to visit this morning. Breath, light, remembrance. This pattern was very, very alive in the teachings of early Christianity. You know, what we're going to explore is that there was this prominent teaching in early Christianity that being that as we embody light, we remember our divine nature, we remember our oneness, and we remember, align with, and we show up as an instrument for the exact same intelligence. The exact same intelligence in this remembered that forms galaxies, that forms ecosystems, that even heals wounds, and the very intelligent that grows a child in a womb. As we remember, that's the intelligence we move into. The Bible calls that collective intelligence the Word, right? As we embody light, we remember and align with all this intelligence, and it all starts with breath. It all starts with breath. We're really going to go into that. So we're going to explore how early Christianity was teaching that this remembering, that this light, this breath, light, and remembrance moves us into. This remembering, it was taught, is not something that was private. It was a remembering that awakens others. It was a remembering that awakens others. That was the original idea for light and the teaching in that time. But before we get to early Christianity, I want to visit the one who inaugurated early Christianity and what Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. What he says in A Course in Miracles. You know, I find myself going back more and more to Course in Miracles. Anybody else? Just recently, yeah, I'm going back more and more to A Course in Miracles. It seems clear to me that this arrived just in time for our day, right? This has not been around that long, and it has arrived just in time for our day, and it couldn't be more obvious. It couldn't be more obvious. So Jesus speaks from what the Course calls the Christ mind, and he says, the light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness, he says. Through my forgiveness. What's he saying there? Well, it's clear that he's saying that this light is what brings peace to every mind. Every mind. The peace comes from the light. But notice in this saying that Jesus isn't saying that it comes through just forgiveness. It comes through my forgiveness, he says. Now, if you go back to some of our early teachings that we were brought up with, you might think that he's talking about pardoning sin, but that's not what he's speaking of here. Jesus is speaking of a way of seeing. A way of seeing. the forgiveness of Christ is our inherent ability to remember through an illumined consciousness. Through an illumined consciousness. Transformation and awakening does not come through ascent by self-help, though that can be very helpful in bringing us to us. Transformation and awakening do not come through ascent by self-help, but through remembrance in the light. Through remembrance in the light. So recently I've been studying this diversity of spiritual exploration in the first few centuries after Jesus. What you discover that early Christianity was far more mystical and diverse than most people realize. It really was. It really was. Now, if you do the research, and it's not difficult to do these days, would you agree? I mean, within a second, you have the answer to the research that you're looking for. So I got that answer within a second. And what it says among early Christianity, you know, we've been taught that there was like this stream of thought of orthodoxy and then there was Gnosticism. That's not true. There were actually 8 streams of thought. It later gets grouped into 2 for a reason. But some of those streams, a few of those streams in early Christianity, they did emphasize doctrine. But many, if not most of the streams, like unity, emphasized awakening. And they taught a pattern, which you can find to research yourself, of breath, light, and remembrance. Breath, light, and remembrance. In one of their texts that's called the Apocryphon of John, the Christ voice says something really remarkable. It says, I am the light that exists within all light. I am the remembrance of the fullness. I am the remembrance of the fullness of the divine. I, the light, am the luminous consciousness, prior to separation consciousness of the ego mind that we often end up in fearful times. Now here's something else that's extraordinary. It wasn't just early Christianity that taught that. It wasn't just early Christianity that taught breath, light, and remembrance. In fact, if you look close, you'll see that it was an early Jewish mysticism. It was a very pronounced teaching. You know, and if you look close, you'll see that the Bible doesn't actually begin with teaching religion. It begins with breath moving across the deep. Breath moving across pure potential is the way it begins. So creation begins with this movement of divine breath, and then something happens immediately after the breath moves. Light. Let there be light after the breath. Let there be light moving. You know, this is not just an accidental, random teaching that we're bumping into. It's a revelation of a pattern that we're exploring this morning. Breath moves, light awakens. Breath moves, light awakens. Early mystical readers noticed this exact same pattern exist inside us. When breath becomes conscious, awareness becomes luminous. In other words, breath stimulates light. Breath stimulates light. Breath activates Christ's seeing. Breath activates that my forgiveness of the Christ mind that we visited from A Course in Miracles. And here is the central truth for us to realize this morning. Breath links consciousness to matter. Breath links light to matter. And your breath links you to the Christ consciousness within you, to that way of seeing that Jesus spoke of. It all starts with breath. So in the challenging days, the challenging news of our challenging times, pay attention. When we go to fear or thoughts of separation, we often lock down on our breath. Have you noticed? We often lock down on our breath, but it's a call for us to do our spiritual work so that we can remain ever so conscious of whether we are breathing or not. Breathing or not. For your breath links you to the Christ consciousness, the Christ way of seeing, and Christ sees wholeness, Now, Genesis, moving further into Genesis, doesn't just tell us that God breathed onto the field of possibility. God also breathed the breath of life into humanity once humanity was created. Think about that. The first gift that we received from God wasn't a rule. It wasn't a rule. And it wasn't a doctrine so that we might not go astray. All right? It was breath. That's the first gift we all received. What I'm inviting us to notice this morning is that awakening retraces the path of the creation of the human. In Genesis, it unfolds outward. The one source breathes on creation, then let there be light, then the creation of the human, and breathing into the human the breath of God. But the journey of awakening moves in the opposite direction. We begin with breath. Breath quiets our mind. Breath softens our body. And breath gathers our scattered awareness. And when our scattered awareness comes back home, we come back home to the light, to illumined consciousness. Modern neuroscience is now actually confirming this, right? Many of you are reading this. They're confirming what the mystics knew centuries ago. Actually, it was most prominent in the first 4 centuries after Jesus, and then it goes somewhere else. Who knows why, right? But modern neuroscience is now letting us know that when breathing slows and deepens, the brain actually shifts. Stress patterns quiet, perceptions become clearer, and the my forgiveness of Christ that brings peace to this world is activated. It all starts with breath. And as we move into the breath, something else emerges. What emerges is beginning to see from the heart. To see from the heart. You know, in the Eastern Christian traditions, this has moved into what they call the prayer of the heart. Anyone heard of the prayer of the heart or practiced the prayer of the heart? Very powerful prayer. That prayer teaches that breath gathers the mind into the heart, and when the mind descends into the heart, the inner light becomes visible. That's what we call a consciousness of love. That's the consciousness of love. It's the intelligence that runs through this whole universe, guiding us. And it all begins with breath. You know, early Christianity, as I'm saying, was absolutely filled with this understanding. In fact, they called Jesus' baptism, they called it illumination. You ever heard it called illumination before? They called it illumination. They noticed that when Jesus comes up out of the water, what happens? The dove, or the breath of God, descends. And then Jesus is illumined, and he hears a voice. This is my son. Do you see it? The exact same pattern is there. As Jesus rises up out of the water before he hears the voice of God, what is he aware of that's descending on him? The breath of God, the holy dove. In all 3 of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this exact pattern is revealed. All 3 of them, breath, light, remembrance. A central insight of early Christianity is that humanity, we've forgotten something they were teaching. Not something intellectually, right? But existentially. We forgot our origin. We forgot our unity. We forgot that life breathing through us is the life of God. It's the life of God. And we forgot that we are all its child. We're all his child. And when humanity forgets these truths, what happens is fear grows, division grows, and separation becomes the story of the world. Have you noticed? Have you noticed? You know, as the centuries passed in early Christianity, what happens after those first 2 centuries, they move into the deserts, into into the deserts of Egypt and Syria. They didn't do that to escape the world, but they moved into it to really realize this deeper truth within the soul. And so there's this wisdom that's preserved called the sayings of the desert fathers. One of the sayings among the desert fathers is this. It says, you cannot heal a divided world from a divided mind. Are you with me? And it all starts with you and your breath. You cannot heal a divided world from a divided mind. And here's one more thing that early Christianity taught. They taught that awakening was collective through remembering. Through remembering. In fact, one of the earliest sayings of the early desert fathers is this, and we could put this up on the screen if it's there. Our life and our death is with our neighbor. If we gain our brother, we have gained God. Whoa. Whoa. That's how important remembering breath is to move into the light, to remember, and as we remember, it becomes a collective remembering. Think about how radical that is, humanity gaining God together. Not some saved while others are left behind, but a humanity remembering together. If I awaken, they taught, yet I remain separated from you, they taught that this meant that our work was incomplete. And another one of my favorite sayings that I found from early Christianity is from something called the Seraphim of Sarav. And it says this, think about this, acquire inner peace and 1,000 around you will be saved. 50 people here this morning, as we all begin to remember, 50,000 begin to remember the truth of our nature. Because consciousness spreads. When light spreads, peace spreads, and thousands around you remember. It all begins with you. But what really is this remembering? What really is this remembering? We hear a lot about it these days, right? Well, I'm going to do a series starting the Saturday before Palm Sunday, okay? And then there's going to be a workshop on Saturday morning, a talk on Palm Sunday, and a talk on Easter, and we're really going to go into the practices and learning more and more and discovering more and more about what that remembering is. Would you agree that that is an important call for our day? Yes, yes. So let's just go with a very general description this morning of what remembrance is. It can be defined as recognizing something or a way or an intelligence that has always been quietly present beneath the noise of the mind. Can you relate? Let me read that again. Remembrance is often described by many people as recognizing something, a way, an intelligence that has always been quietly present beneath the noise of the mind. It's actually what we explored in the very beginning of this talk. As we embody light and remember, we remember our divine nature, our oneness, and we remember and align with, and we become this instrument for this intelligence that we're becoming aware of, the same intelligence that heals wounds and grows a child in the womb. We remember and align with all this. That's the intelligence we're being called to live from. That intelligence, the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things that were made and created were created through the Word. That's the pattern. That's the pattern. It all starts with breath, though, so pay attention to noticing when you move into this intelligence. You've been there many times. It's a very, very powerful spot. But here's the thing to notice about it this morning. It probably and most likely won't seem dramatic. It won't seem dramatic. But it's a power and it's a presence that transforms this world, even though it's subtle and profound. So pay attention. Remembering is much more subtle, but yet more profound than we often think. So if the musicians want to come forward. I like to close the talk by visiting the Gospel of John that we just visited, okay? In the Gospel of John, it says, right in the beginning, right towards the beginning, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light has never been extinguished. It'll never be extinguished. Only forgotten. Only forgotten. And the good news for all of us is to remember, regardless of what you're seeing through your two eyes, your single eye sees that that light was never extinguished, that it's only been forgotten, and breath may be the simplest doorway back to moving into that illuminant state of consciousness where we're all remembering together. I said in the beginning that we were going to visit the fundamentals. And you know, when we do our meditations and when we have our teachings here, we talk a lot about breath. And when we start out our meditations, we move into breath. The whole reason is we're moving into breath because breath links us, links our consciousness to our body, to one another. So, in the scriptures, it says you must be born again. You must begin to see again. You must begin to see from a new perception, wholeness. You must be born again through spirit, through breath, and through water, through that very medium which breath moves through to become life. So the call this morning is stay in your breath. Regardless of the news, stay in your breath. Keep breathing, and we'll remember together. And it all will start with breath. Namaste. Namaste.